Canada is sitting on a demographic powder keg, and the fuse is burning fast. More than 1 million work permits expired at the end of last year, nearly half belonging to Indian nationals, which is the hardest hit immigrant group. The rest is a global mix. Hello everyone, welcome to Chai and Chat with Mohini. I'm Mohini Singh. For Indian families, immigration was never just paperwork. It was a promise of a new life paid for by mortgaging land back home, and it was built on the belief that Canada would open a door to a better life. Now that promise is cracking. Students who arrived full of hope are watching their permits tick away like a clock they can't stop. Workers who spent years building Canada's economy are being told the rules have changed and they might have to leave the country they now call home. Futures are hanging in limbo, and an entire community is bracing for what comes next. Joining us to help unpack the new ruling and its implications is Bryan Fitzpatrick, who's with Busher Mitchell in Kelowna, and he is a top legal authority on immigration issues. Welcome, Bryan. But before we go any further, please have some chai. It comes to us from Samosa Place. Nice way to start our discussion. However, let's start from the beginning. How did Canada end up with more than 1 million work permits ending altogether at the same time, and more than half of them impact Indian nationals?
Very good question, or two-part question, Mohini. I think primarily it was the focus of the federal government to grow our population, in turn help grow the economy, meet the needs of the economy, and I think more specifically when it comes to Indian nationals, they typically are promoting learning English, or that's a priority for them, and so as our system is set up, it prioritizes people who speak English or French, and of course speak it well, and so they're well positioned to be able to apply to immigrate to Canada, and to apply to study in Canada. And I think the other factor is that when you look at the cost of tuition in Canada, even as an international student, it's much less expensive than, for example, in the United States, or maybe in the UK. And so that was something that I think made Canada a desirable place for students from India. As well, I think the postgraduate work permit process, the ability to work after completing your studies, was also another draw.
And then work towards getting a PR, and it's a pathway to getting your citizenship.
That's correct. Typically, I think someone who's looking down the road and trying to decide where to go, if they're looking at the UK or New Zealand, or the United States or Canada, when they were applying, they would see, okay, if I go to study in Canada, I get my degree, I get to work and accumulate some Canadian work experience, and now I've got a good opportunity or a good pathway to become a PR, and maybe 5 years down the road, or thereafter, become a Canadian citizen. And so I think that was kind of the thought process.
So, but how did we land up in a situation where we have 1 million people? I mean, that's like almost 1/5 or 1/6 of British Columbia's population.
Yes, I think you have to look at the yearly targets that the government was trying to reach, and I think when you say it's 300,000 or 385,000 people, and you have cumulative years of those targets, well, you're going to get to 1 million pretty quick.
So what happens to these people whose work permits have expired? And typically there are many who are facing processing delays. So is there any leeway for them from a legal perspective?
So if someone's work permit has expired, typically they have 90 days to restore their status. They always want to make sure that they have valid status maintained in Canada at all times. And so what they need to do is be proactive and try and find an avenue that allows them to apply for a new work permit, a different work permit, or some method to maintain their status, and do so before their status expires.
The U.S., where you have armed officials going and grabbing people without their papers, and typically known as ICE, will we see that here?
I think it seems to me, and I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves. I think there is going to be more of an enforcement oriented approach, and insofar as we have an economy that is slowing, we have an unemployment rate that's high, and so I think there's political pressure there to go and follow through and enforce the immigration laws, and so I think we will see greater enforcement in terms of those who are without status or who are here illegally. And I think that's something that Canadians, permanent residents, want to see prioritized. Those who follow the rules want to make sure that everyone is doing so as well.
So, for students wanting to come here to study, and the end goal being citizenship, what's a pathway they could follow?
I think they really need to look at, the Canadian government has been more recently been quite clear, and even here in British Columbia, about the categories or the areas where there's clearly a need. And so healthcare is one of those. So I think if someone's looking to study, they need to, look at those areas that have been prioritized by the government and really decide, is that a good option for them? Is healthcare an option? Because if it is, that's likely going to give them the best path forward towards permanent residency, and they're going to make an important contribution to British Columbia and to Canada. We in healthcare especially, we need educated people and people that can contribute, and so I think that's key. Find an area where you can contribute.
Any legal bearing on someone who's been here a long time, even though has just had a work permit and now their permit has expired? Is there any legal bearing, the time factor that they've contributed to this country?
The federal government has, complete authority when it comes to immigration, and so if they decide that a particular pathway is no longer going to be an option, and someone was planning on pursuing that particular option, that's essentially, they're within their power to do that, unfortunately. So there really isn't any recourse, even if so you always need to be aware that things can change, policies change, immigration changes rapidly, changes with a new government and a new minister of immigration. All these things influence the pathways that are open to people. So, and unfortunately, there's no recourse. If you've already applied for a work permit or a particular pathway, then yes, you are entitled to procedural fairness. The government can't just simply pull that out from under you without explaining why, and you can potentially have that reviewed in court. But if you haven't applied and you're hoping to do so, there's no recourse.
So if someone's work permit has expired, they have 90 days to appeal it. So they buy themselves 3 months. And then what are the determining factors that suggest that no, your work permit has expired, you need to pack up and leave?
You really have to look at it on a case by case basis. I would say that if a document is missing or something hasn't been properly explained, those would be good scenarios where you can try and reopen the application and ask them to reconsider it. But what you want to do is make sure going into it that you have your ducks in a row, that you're going through the right program for your credentials or based on your background, and make sure that you're doing that ahead of time, not after the fact.
Do you have a lot of people coming to see you panicking?
We have been extremely busy. Of course, we also help people with U.S. immigration. So there's been a flood of people wanting advice about going to the United States.
Going to the United States,
Yes,
one would
believe it or not.
imagine
Yeah.
we're talking about Americans coming to Canada.
I think a lot of the media has done a good job in terms of. I think people are quite afraid or worried, and so they want to get some legal advice. They want to make sure they understand what their obligations are when they're traveling to the United States, that they get the right advice, and so that's part of it. But I think. And on the Canadian side, because the number of options are narrower, people now are less apt to do it themselves or less wanting to do it themselves. So they're reaching out to get legal advice, and I think that's really driving the phone ringing, as it were, people needing that advice.
Brian, a lot of the jobs that are done here, such as skip the dishes, stores, fast food chains, and all done by people on a work permit, more or less. So how is that all this going to impact? Boom, 1 million. It's going to really impact the Canadian labor pool. Also, another 1,970,000 work permits expire at the end of this year. So that's a million last year, the million this year. What now? I mean, do you see that impacting how the government views these regulations?
I think, as I understand it, more recently the government has said that people who are already here, who've already established themselves, they tend to do better when it comes to getting ahead, putting down roots. And so I think their plan is to prioritize people that are already here, helping them find a pathway. So hopefully we'll have some further clarity on that, what that's going to look like. Because they're already here, they're established, they're contributing, as you said, to the economy, doing jobs that typically, Canadians don't always want to do, or it's more of a stepping stone to what they want to do. And so hopefully we'll get some clarity on that, so we can have those people that are contributing now, that have made an investment in our country, are going to be able to stay here and continue to contribute, because they do contribute, and it's just trying to find the right balance, I think.
So, what do you hope will be the takeaway from this discussion? I want somebody watching this who's on a work permit in a panicking mode to learn something. What do you hope will be the takeaway?
Well, I think just number one, be proactive. Don't wait till the last minute to try and understand what options are available to you. Keep an open mind in terms of, even if the, what you're qualified to do now isn't ultimately what you want to do, that can, give you an option to continue to build your skill set, so you're in a better position to apply for permanent residence. Education is extremely important.
Is learning French important?
I think learning French is, if staying in Canada is a priority for somebody, then either brushing up on it or learning it is really important. That's something that's being, the francophone pathways are being prioritized, and promoting the use of French outside the province of Quebec is a priority. And so it's a great option for people who have the inclination and the wherewithal to learn to speak French.
Last word to you, Brian. What would you like us, if you had a key message to give out from this conversation, what would it be?
I think at the end of the day, it's immigrants contribute to Canada, and we've got to find a way to help them continue to contribute, and hopefully we can have some additional pathways for people here as we move into the new year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for helping us navigate our way through this very complex situation. It is not easy when you see your work permit expire and you have no recourse. Very difficult. There are 500,000 people panicking right now, and another 500,000 to go this year. Thank you very much for your expertise and your advice.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
So, folks, the bottom line here is when a permit expires, your legal rights shrink fast, options disappear, and the system moves on. Whether you're ready or not in an immigration process that doesn't slow down for anyone, these changes are already affecting people. They're real, they're immediate, and they matter for anyone trying to stay in Canada legally. If you found this episode informative, please hit like and share. On our next podcast, we learn about what lies ahead for homeowners in BC after a landmark court ruling. Is individual property ownership on the collision course with Indigenous groups over land authority? Please stay informed, stay prepared, and stay connected to the updates that could shape your future. Until next time, from all of us here at Chai and Chat, goodbye.